Good morning, and welcome to the July 2025 board meetings of the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulation Agency, or MHRA, as we prefer to call ourselves. My name is Professor Anthony Harnden, and I am the chair of the board. I must start by reminding everybody that this is a board meeting held in public, but it is not a public meeting. And it's important to explain to all you listening that this board is responsible for agreeing the strategic direction of the agency, maintaining high standards of corporate governance and scrutinising the performance of the MHRA, but to clarify that this board does not make any regulatory decisions on any individual medicines or medical devices. This is because regulatory decisions on individual medical products are made by ministers in the Department of Health and Social Care on the recommendation of MHRA officials who are independent civil servants, with the additional independent advice from our expert advisory committees, such as the Commission on Human Medicines. Now, as far as today's meeting is concerned, I need to make you aware that we are recording the meeting so that we can publish the video on our websites to provide the opportunity for as many people as possible to observe what the board does. On that note, I'm really delighted that 77 people have registered to observe our meeting live today, with 16 representatives of patient groups, 16 from industry, and 9 from academia, clinical research, and charities. So great welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. I hope you find the meeting interesting. With the introductions in mind, I'd like to go around the room and ask my colleagues on the board to introduce themselves so the audience know who we all are. And I'd particularly like to welcome our new CEO, Lawrence Tallon, who is attending his first board meeting held in public today, as well as our new Chief People Officer, Tasneem Blondin, who is joining the board for this meeting. So I will start with Lawrence to introduce himself, and then we'll go around the room in this direction.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Oh, to my microphone. Thank you, Chair. So for the benefit of those online, I'm Lawrence Tallon, incoming Chief Executive, started on the 1st of April. Delighted to be here for my first of these public board meetings. The majority of my career has been in hospital services in research active hospitals. So I bring that perspective to bear, I guess, in terms of my role here. And I've also had a decade or so in the civil service, so I also understand the inner workings of government. But delighted to be here and be part of the team.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name's Alison Cave, and I'm Chief Safety Officer at the MHRA.
Good morning. My name's Nicola Rose. I'm the Interim Executive Director for Science and Research at the MHRA.
Good morning, everyone. Raj Long, Non-Executive Director on the board. Thank you.
Good morning. Julian Beach, Interim Executive Director for Healthcare Quality and Access.
Good morning. Mercy Jessingham, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning. My name's Harriet Tear. I'm Interim Director of Partnerships at the MHRA.
Good morning, Hader Hussain, Non-Exec Director.
Good morning, I'm Rose Braithwaite and I'm the Chief Finance Officer here at the MHRA.
Good morning, Tasneem Blondin, Chief People Officer. I joined 3 weeks ago. Delighted to be here at my first public board meeting. Thank you.
Graham Cook, I'm Non-Executive Director and Deputy Chair.
Alani Wailahi, Private Sec at the MHRA. Thank you.
Good morning. It's Claire Harrison, Chief Digital and Technology Officer at MHRA.
Morning. My name's Mandy Calvert and I'm Non-Executive Director.
Good morning. James Pound, Interim Executive Director, Innovation and Compliance at the MHRA.
Good morning. Paul Goldsmith, Non-Executive Director.
Good morning. My name is Michael Whitehouse. I'm a Non-Executive Director.
Good morning, Catherine Glover, Deputy Director for Medicines Regulation and Prescribing at the Department of Health and Social Care.
Good morning, I'm Rachel Bosworth, Director of Communications and Engagement at the MHRA.
Good morning, Carly McGurry, Director of Governance, MHRA.
Look forward to having a really productive discussion today. We've received apologies from 4 people, Natalie Richards, Steph Harding, Ed Middleton and Janae Bargevart. So if we come on to the first item, which is declarations of interest, and I will explain that we do take conflicts of interest very seriously on this board, and we have a conflicts of interest policy which is currently being revised. So can I ask around the table if anybody has any new conflicts of interest that need to be declared other than ones which will be published in the minutes from the meeting? Paul.
I'm now a trustee of a charity called Foundation for Evolution and Mental Health.
Thank you. That sounds really good. I don't think that will present us with any conflict problems. Anybody else? Excellent. So we'll move on now to the minutes from the March board meeting, which was held in public. Does anybody have any comments about those minutes? So I take silence to say that those minutes then are approved. I've read through them and I think that they're a full representation of the March meeting. So minutes are approved for that meeting. In the pack, we have an updated board terms of reference document, which was updated by Carly. And I think Carly's going to say something about that document now.
Yes, so just a few further tweaks since the draft that members will have seen in May in Scotland. Picked up a few typos, including the name of the new committee. We have clarified the logistics that apply for board meetings in public versus non-public, and included some language from the framework document about the role and authority of the board assurance committees. That's all of the changes.
Do you want to just tell us about the new, for the public benefit, about the new assurance committees?
Yes, can do. So we have 3 subcommittees of the board. One of those is the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, which we are required to have, which focuses on risk management, audit, governance, controls and financial rigour. And we are now moving to a Public and People Engagement Committee, which will look at our responsibilities in relation to engendering public trust in the work of the agency and ensuring that the agency is a great place to work. And our Regulation and Safety Committee will look at the way in which we regulate and ensure safety of products and of people and public health.
Thanks, Carly. And for those listening, if you carry on listening, you'll hear a little bit more about those committees later on in the agenda. But 3 really important assurance committees for the board. So are the board happy about the updated terms of reference? Mercy.
Just that it hasn't been updated. So it's People and Public Engagement Committee, and it says here People and Patient Engagement Committee. So so we did discuss it, and as you said, you picked it up, Carly, but just for complete clarity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. It's really important, and we'll come on to discuss how that committees can be really important in working out ways of engaging, different ways of engaging with the public, because really important function of the board and the assurance committees is that we work out, how we engage with the public in different sort of ways. So thank you very much for pointing that out. Any other comments? Good. Okay. Well, we'll come on to the next item, which is always an interesting item, which is the CEO's report. Really looking forward to hearing your report, Lawrence. Really pleased that the 10-year plan mentions the MHRA, I think, in 4 different places. One regarding hosting the Patient Safety Commissioner, which will be a huge asset, I think, for the organisation. Closer working alignment with NICE, which will be very welcomed, I'm sure, by the government and by industry. Regulating AI and of course promoting innovations. So it was really good to see that mentioned so many times. So well done for your input into that report, and really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say about your report now.
Thanks, Anthony. I will talk for about 10 minutes or so to try and summarise some of the points in this report, and then make sure we've got plenty of time for questions and discussion. You will see that I've said this is an overview of what has been an incredibly intensive period of activity for the agency, and a very successful period of activity as well. So I'm skirting over the surface of a huge amount of work in here. I'm very happy to get into some of that with my colleagues in the questions. But I think if I were to summarise the position of the quarter that we have just closed, it would be one where we've maintained and consolidated the significant performance improvements that the agency achieved last year. And that more solid platform of performance has allowed us to be more forward-thinking about our future strategy and outward-looking to the many, many partners that we engage with in health and social care. So I'll talk first about the strategic outlook, and then I'll come on to performance issues. And as the chairman said, there have been a number of notable government documents coming out, and one still to come. The Chancellor published the spending review, of course, on the 11th of June, and it made very clear the commitments of this government to funding health services and also life sciences as an engine of economic growth, and a crucial way in which we will improve the health service. That was then followed up by the 10-year plan, and we are warmly anticipating the life sciences sector delivery plan, which will be the sector plan within the overall industrial strategy. And as Anthony said, there are a number of significant roles for the MHRA within those various documents around our close working with NICE, and huge credit to Julian Beach in particular, for the real close working that we've now got between the MHRA and NICE, so that we will be able to do marketing authorization and health technology appraisal in parallel from April 2026, something that will be better for patients because it will mean that medicines get reimbursed more quickly after their marketing authorization or in parallel with their marketing authorization, and obviously something that industry will welcome as well. It's clear that those various documents make a really significant commitment to AI across many sectors, and certainly in medtech and life sciences. And we have a really important role because no country has entirely figured out how to do regulation of AI as a medical device. This is very much an emerging field, and we are referred to in the life sciences, in the 10-year health plan, as a thought leader in AI as a medical device. And we absolutely aspire to use the next year to revise regulations to be at the forefront of how we regulate AI as a medical device. We're very pleased that the Patient Safety Commissioner, Dr. Henrietta Hughes, will be hosted by the organisation. I do emphasise the word hosted. She will, of course, retain her objectivity and her ability to speak as an independent authoritative view commentator on behalf of patients, but we will be the host organisation. And I think the benefit of that is, while she retains the objectivity, it will mean she just has a greater ability to influence our entire agenda around patient safety. Clearly something we do as absolutely the core of what we do anyway, but having her voice within the organisation as well as outside the organisation, I think just strengthens our focus on safety. And then, of course, the work on clinical trials and the Prime Minister's announcement to shorten the end-to-end life cycle for clinical trials. And again, James may say more about this. Our organisation has done a phenomenal job of bringing down the timescales for clinical trials, but of course it's an end-to-end pathway with the Health Research Authority, ourselves and the NHS, and we need to focus on the end-to-end life cycle of clinical trials. So I see this very much as we're closing the last year of the current spending review, and we're now looking ahead to the next year of the new spending review. And so over the course of the next 9 to 12 months with the board and many partners will be developing our new strategy to take us into the next 3 and even 5 years. I want to touch now on safety. And again, you can see from this report a very high-level summary of a huge range of activity in which the agency has exercised the full span of its regulatory powers. In particular, I want to compliment the work of our criminal enforcement unit for executing incredibly successfully Operation Subaru. This is in the public domain, and there is in fact a link in my paper if people want to read more about Operation Subaru. But this was a major criminal enforcement operation spanning countries with a number of arrests, I think 12 arrests across the West Midlands and the northwest of England, but a criminal conspiracy spanning Southeast Asia and India to traffic medicines into the UK and sell them through unregulated and illegal means, putting patients and consumers at severe risk of harm. Our criminal enforcement unit, working with other law enforcement agencies, executed this textbook operation at the end of April. Another really, really important intervention we've made around safety, and again, really want to compliment Alison here for her significant intervention at a national level to shape the discussion around this new class of medicines, the GLP-1s. And of course, we are, as a country, very positive about the potential for GLP-1s to address this incredible problem of obesity and the associated diseases that come with it. But these are powerful medicines that need to be used after prescription from a qualified healthcare professional under supervision and purchased through authorised routes and in line with their indication. And Alison made a really important intervention in June, which was widely covered across broadcast and print media, about not using these medicines during pregnancy and the potential impact on contraception of one of these, on oral contraception of one of these particular medicines. And Alison might want to say more, but I think this is really indicative of the authoritative role that we can play as an agency with our expertise to keep patients and the public safe in the light of new emerging evidence. We brought in new post-market surveillance regulations from the 16th of June, and this is a really fundamental contribution to our future safety net, that we will be getting much more rapid data from device manufacturers about any potential safety issues. So that's a very significant intervention too. I'll come on now to talk about performance and the overall performance picture, just mindful of time and needing to allow time for questions. Overall, we remain now green against all of our statutory performance targets. This was something that was just achieved at the end of the last financial year, but has now been maintained through the first part of this year. And we have confidence that we will be able to make this a sustainable performance improvement, because we continue to recruit new scientific assessors to expand our pipeline. And there's a list of some of the new medicines that we've been able to authorise in the paper, and Julian might want to say more. But I think we're now confident that we can be predictable, reliable within timescales, and are continuing to drive down the time that it takes for us to reach those new decisions. Where we now need to focus our effort around performance is scientific advice. Just a reminder, this is not part of the statutory performance targets, but it is an exceptionally important contribution that the agency makes to scientific advances in this country. And we know, if we look at our international peers, this is one of the real unique selling points of this country, that we can provide that upfront scientific advice before people make their applications for clinical trials or marketing authorization. And we are still behind where we need to be on those measures. The performance, however, is improving, because as we've got on top of the backlogs around clinical trials and marketing authorization, and as we've recruited more scientific assessors, it allows us to pivot more of our resources to those upfront scientific advice meetings and discussions. We will continue to push on that. I've noted in the paper that we have the significant IT-driven change program, Regulatory Connect, ongoing, and I have noted my concerns about that program and the timescales. It's significantly delayed from its original timescales. and James Pound as the SRO and I have appointed a new programme director really to drive that forward and take stock of the current situation. Moving on to innovation now, we have had a notable success in a couple of successes in our focus on AI, which I briefly talked about earlier. So the first is that we have now launched the second round of our unique AI airlock program and invited applications to that. That's been exceptionally well received by AI innovators. And we've also become the first country to join the Health AI Global Regulatory Network, soon to be followed by a number of other countries that are very advanced in this space. I won't mention which ones they are because I think they're not yet ready to announce publicly, but we will soon be followed by some really excellent peer countries. And this will help us not only be a thought leader nationally, but contribute to international standards around AI. Coming on now to people, and again, it's great to welcome Tasneem to her first meeting, and she's already had a terrific impact in the organisation in the short time she's been here. One of the things that Tasneem will be helping us drive forward is really standing up our new office in Leeds, which the board approved at its last meeting. So we've announced now that we will be opening that office. We've been very clear that we remain committed to this site, 10SC in Canary Wharf, and to our science campus in South Mims. But this is an additional option consistent with the government's intention under the Places for Growth initiative to move more civil service jobs out of London. It's particularly importantly that we've chosen Leeds, and great thanks to Claire for her input here, because Leeds is a real hub of tech professionals and tech students. There are 44,000 people in tech-related jobs in the Leeds economy, 18,000 people studying tech-related subjects within Leeds. So this is, outside of London, a really, really vibrant tech economy. And we will find it easier, we believe, to recruit into Leeds than we do currently with the fierce competition around Canary Wharf. So we're really, really excited about the opportunity then to create a third base for the agency in Leeds. And it's really important we set the right tone and the right culture in that organisation, and Tasneem will be leading that work for us. We've been continuing to act on the results of last year's staff survey, and we're now looking ahead to the next staff survey that will kick off in September. And I think we're very confident we've made a huge amount of progress in some of those areas where staff express concerns. And so we will be making sure that staff in our organisation are aware of that progress, but we will continue to listen to them because we know that there are many other things we still need to act on. And the words that I've been repeating often about the culture of the organisation is that we need to have a culture of openness, trust and empowerment. And I think there's still some work to do there based on what we're hearing from our staff survey. And I will be with Tasneem and the whole team really focusing on that culture of trust, openness and empowerment. Just lastly, because I'm mindful of time, we've also been doing a lot of work in this outward-facing strategic phase to really work on our partnerships. And I think the organisation has a great culture of partnership working, but it has been so focused on clearing the backlogs, it simply hasn't had as much time and headspace as it would ideally have liked to focus on partnerships. And I think the work that Harriet and Rachel Arundel have been doing, leading for us to really reach out to our partners has been excellent in the last quarter. In particular, the work we've been doing with NICE that I've already mentioned, our collaborations with NHS Blood and Transplant, with the Health Research Authority, with the devolved administrations, and of course we had an excellent meeting in Scotland, and we have others scheduled in Wales and Northern Ireland. And we've also been extending or renewing our relationships at an international level with the Food and Drug Administration in the US. And I had a very good meeting with Alison and the new Commissioner, Dr. Marty Macquarie. We've also had good meetings with Emma Cook at the European Medicines Association and with the heads of the access countries, heads of agency of the access countries, Australia, Canada, Singapore and Switzerland. And I see that being an increasingly fruitful and collaborative relationship in the years ahead. So I intended to be even more quick with that, Anthony. That's a real whistle-stop tour of a huge amount of activity, but I'll stop now and perhaps people might have questions.
Yes, I mean, the report represents a huge amount of work and I think you're really off to a flying start, Lawrence, and certainly, I think the whole board would agree with you that openness, trust, and empowerment is so important for the people of this agency. So thank you very much. Now, can I just open that up to questions? We'll start with Mercy.
Yeah, I really welcome that Henrietta Hughes is going to be hosted by us. I think that's an important move and an important signal, but also knowing that she is going to be independent and working across the whole sector. And I was just going to ask Lawrence about thinking about our patient safety profile. And actually, we have one part to play, but the NHS, prescribers, other people have a part to play. How do you see Henrietta supporting us in keeping patients safe?
Yes, so I think the genesis of Henrietta Hughes coming to be hosted by our organisation is the Penny Dash review, which has just been published. If I were to summarise Penny's review, what she's trying to do is say that we have a somewhat complex and cluttered landscape around patient safety organisations. And so the purpose of that review is to try and consolidate and simplify the approach to patient safety. One of those measures, therefore, is to bring the Patient Safety Commissioner into the organisation. I should say that I think we have a strong safety system already, particularly based around the yellow card system and the ability to interrogate data, particularly primary care data, through our clinical practice research database. Yeah, data link. So yeah, thanks. But we are looking to build on that in a number of ways. The first measure that you've already discussed is bringing the Patient Safety Commissioner in, so she's much more involved in our decision making upfront rather than writing to us as an external partner. The second one is the work we're doing around devices safety, where we've really strengthened the regulations around devices safety from the 16th of June. We, of course, have got a huge range of enforcement activity. I mentioned Operation Subaru, which is perhaps the most high profile of the things we've done, but we're continually looking at things like illicit websites and unregulated routes through which we need to address safety concerns. I think longer term, what we aspire to do is expand the volume and the frequency and the timescale of our digital safety and surveillance system in the real world. So there are multiple data sources that we would look to link with over time: hospital patient records, community pharmacy records, and multiple other sources of data. So I think we are confident in our yellow card system, but we also can see almost the next generation of what that could be in the digital era. And Alison, perhaps you might want to add a little bit more.
Yeah, I could add a little bit more. So firstly, yes, just to reiterate, we have a very strong relationship already with the Patient Safety Commissioner. I meet with her monthly, but as Lawrence says, having Henrietta alongside while retaining her independence will enable us to interact with her on a more iterative, regular basis. In terms of the safety landscape, as Lawrence says, we have the yellow card system, which is still a major plank, but we're looking across the system about how we can use technological levers to improve reporting into that system, increase the ease for which healthcare professionals report to us across all of the various sectors of the healthcare system, so primary, secondary care and other places where patients seek care. We're also looking at how we can more proactively seek signals instead of requiring them to be reported to us. What are the ways that we could potentially proactively identify signals in advance? And we have an agenda item on the yellow card biobank, which is one area where we're seeking proactively to understand the mechanism underlying ADRs, which will enable us to target in the future patients who may be more susceptible. But we're looking at other ways that we could also look for signals proactively. And we're also working with a number of different partners, as Lawrence mentioned, to see what other sources of evidence could we look for that would supplement the yellow card scheme and the things that we're already doing through CPRD, which is our real world evidence data service. Happy to pick up any additional questions.
Thanks. for the benefit of the public, ADR being adverse drug reactions. You know, I'm really, really pleased with this, Lawrence, really pleased, because I think, you know, one of the things that I said when I became chair was that safety needs to be first, middle, and end of everything that we do within this organisation. We are ultimately a safety organisation, and it can only be to the benefit of the organisation that we host this patient safety commissioner, albeit independently, but and that we work really hard, strive really hard to use multiple data sources to improve on our safety. So congratulations on that. I have Michael, Graham, then Raj. So Michael first.
Thank you, Chair, and very impressive report, Lawrence. Thank you very much. A lot done in a very short space of time. My question relates to the joint reviews with NICE, which is a very welcome development. I just really wanted some assurance around from Julian. What is the scale of changes in process or information flows that need to be enacted to make this happen and to be effective? Are we there, or is there a lot of work that has to be done to get us into a position that these joint reviews can be effective? I know implementation is from April of next year. So is the work to be done in that period before we get there?
So thank you, Michael, for the question. So there is work to be done from both sides, both NICE and from MHRA. It does require some changes in process, so how we get notified of applications coming into the agency. So there will be more details coming out in phases over the next 3 months for companies to understand what does that mean. So we are looking to encourage the use of PharmaScan, and so that those companies wishing to absolutely take advantage of this, it will be an opt-in scheme, so it will not be a mandated scheme. It will be then looking at that, and over the next year, well, between now and April, ensuring that we've got the working relationship between NICE and MHRA for things like information sharing, which would be another mandated aspect of the scheme, so that we can then see with NICE what applications are coming in, when are they scheduled, so that it's about the scheduling as much as it is about the review and the practice. So there will be some changes in NICE practice up front that we will need to be aware of in terms of ensuring the governance of the process between the two organisations, as much as anything else, will be looking to achieve that outcome. What I would say is also that from an MHRA point of view, we see that is changing how we consider maybe some of the information that would be coming from assessment, but that is not something that will fundamentally change our process within it. So I'm quite assured within the MHRA that we have the capability to deliver that post-April 2026, which is why we're then looking at having a runway to that to make sure we iron out the details to again do that credible delivery.
Chair, I think this is so important going forward. The more that you can keep the board updated on progress would be really important, I think. Thank you.
It's really important work, Julian, and you know, from getting new products to the public as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. I think working in conjunction with NICE will be fantastic in that. So well done. Did you want to say something else? Or?
So just one other final point. It's obviously working as a 3 as well, so that it's just really, it's NICE and MHRA is 2/3 of it, and then working in collaboration with the NHS is the other critical aspect with this, so that we then look at, it's not only licensing the guidance, it's then also access for patients within the NHS. And so that's the other part that we are also working with our partners to achieve as well.
Great. I have Graham next.
Thanks, Lawrence. I mean, really great report. And just to sort of echo the recognition of the effort that you and your team have put in recently. I mean, the energy is visible, and I think it's appreciated outside as well with your work with stakeholders. I think colleagues in Cambridge yesterday were, very pleased with the visit and to be able to talk about software as a medical device and so on. Just wanted to pick up what you said about GLP-1 and the safety issues. I think one of the things that sort of concerns me slightly is the numbers of patients on these treatments. It may not be quite well recognised, largely because they're in the private sector. And we may have somewhere between 1 or 2 million people taking these drugs, of which maybe 80 or 90% are in the private sector. So I suppose the question from the agency perspective is, how confident are we that the signals in the private sector are detected as easily as they are in the public sector? And are we confident that we're going to be finding these signals? And I think we saw some of the important problems in the news. And I think the coverage this week, last week from MHRA was really great. And I think the key question being whether we can pick up further things in future.
Thanks, Graham. I mean, I'm going to give some overall comments, and then I'm going to hand to Alison for a more specific answer about the confidence of the signals. Because I think this group of medicines is one of the most important things we're seeing in healthcare for many, many years. Because we've had this incredible problem of obesity, which in historical terms is a relatively new phenomenon, and we haven't known how to deal with it. And suddenly now we have a class of medicines that have the potential to almost solve this problem. But the health system as a whole is still working out how to adapt in terms of safety signals, in terms of reimbursement, in terms of prescriptions. And the thing that we're seeing, which is almost unique and we haven't seen before, is effectively direct to consumer sales. So people are not waiting to go through the normal order of things that they would normally go through their GPs. If we take a comparison, something like statins, where they're widely in use, but they're very widely in use through GP prescription. We're also aware that there are either unregulated or regulated but not necessarily well managed routes to access these medicines. So people are often accessing through someone who is qualified to prescribe, but it's all online, based on not necessarily the most solid clinical assessment of need. And of course, these medicines, although they present huge potential, they are powerful medicines which are licensed for use in people who have significant obesity causing disease. They are not intended to be a lifestyle measure. They're not a dietary supplement. They are an important but powerful medicine. And I don't think we've ever quite seen anything hit the market, hit consumers in such a sudden way that people are just accessing them all over the place. So I'm going to hand to Alison in a minute to answer the safety signals one. But I just want to emphasise that this is overall has tremendous beneficial impact, but they must be used in line with the indication and through a qualified medical professional. And in those cases, we are confident about the safety. But as you rightly say, Graham, the use is much, much wider than indication and through the qualified medical professionals. Alison, you might want to say a bit more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to build on what Lawrence is saying, we are aware that probably 90% of the usage is through private online sites rather than prescribed through the NHS. And many of those sites, I would emphasise, are legitimate pharmacy sites and will be prescribing according to the indication. I mean, while I have the opportunity on public board, I would remind patients that these medicines should not be bought from unregulated sellers, such as beauty salons or via social media. And as Lawrence says, to emphasise the need to consult with a healthcare professional. But having said that, we are working with organisations in the private sector and others to see how we might work with private prescribers to access or to understand signals, and also to understand the practice and how they engage with the patients who are purchasing these medicines from them. I would say that, raising awareness of the yellow card scheme through some of the media work we did recently is incredibly effective. So we saw a 50% increase in traffic to the yellow card scheme as a result of the media work that we did, an 8-fold increase in reporting on the day. And we have also implemented new questions, conditional questions, when patients are reporting on some of the signals that we want to gain more information with. And 300 of the 426 reports that we received did complete that additional information. So that really helps us in terms of understanding the context around any safety signal that somebody's reporting to us, and also potentially reduces the need to follow up. So we're doing lots of things to try and really track and carefully understand any safety concerns which might arise, or that we're already aware of. And I would say that all of the signals that we're currently working on are not new signals. They're already recognized, and what we're trying to understand is more about those characteristics.
Given this important issue, Graham, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just briefly, I think that's very reassuring. I think that I can't think of a time previously when we've had a drug that's been used so heavily in the private sector as opposed to the public sector. So at some future point at board, it just might be helpful to review whether we're seeing the same signals and just understand how well that's working. It's great to hear that you've got engagement with the providers, and there's no criticism of them, but I think hopefully they're engaged in this conversation and will be able to provide the information we need.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I have Raj, then Hader, then Mandy. So Raj.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for the report. It's the momentum and is very tangible. And that's really reassuring for all of us to see. So it's great to see that in such a short time. My question is really going to be around, I'm going to pick up on the nice bit, the collaboration bit, because I think Michael very nicely has put in a segue for that. The best example of that situation is the current dementia therapies that have been approved, and has been approved by the MHRA, and as of last week, not approved by NICE. So we need to step back here a little bit and say, this won't be the first and the last time. This would be, I'm going to say, this will be fairly typical characteristic of first generation therapies in complex treatments. And we have a few coming up the pipeline. We'll have vaccines for oncology. We're going to have cell and gene therapy. The science is an evolving science, and we need to shape it. The disruption I see, and this is nothing to do, NICE has got its own advisory committee and they make the decisions they need to make. But the disruption we see is beyond just NICE and MHRA. As a result of the previous therapy, the first one that was not approved, those companies are laying off teams in the UK, and it will affect the neuroscience therapeutic area. That will have major repercussions for the 10-year plan, because if you step back and you think, if they're going to lay off, neuroscience coming back in these areas for some companies, it's going to be rethought. They will have second thoughts, because if they can't get the product to patients, they can't run a business. I'm talking about industry here. So that's going to impact research. It's got so many ramifications that I see down the road. Bringing an R&D here, because for the two products, we had patients in clinical trials here. Now they can't get the product through NHS. So and the other piece for us is in this situation is we won't get yellow card safety data that for Alison to work on, because it's not going through the NHS system. It's for private use. You're going to have limited. So the ramifications are multifold. It's safety, future R&D. Patients who've been in clinical trials now cannot access the products. So it's a massive problem for a very small scope of products. It is not the state of business. So we don't need to boil the ocean here. So I really welcome Julian having these discussions, but it has to be a very structured approach and proposal to see how we tackle it. We have efficacy that we approve from the MHRA. When I say I'm using collective here, it's a team that approves it. And effectiveness is what NICE approves, and cost goes into effectiveness. Somewhere in the process of our development cycle, we need to start thinking for this very small scope of first generation therapies that are likely to come up. What can we learn from the current state? And how do we work together, not just NICE, but also NHS, because they're a critical player in this. They kind of shape and influence everything else, working backwards. But very importantly, for this very small scope of drugs, you talked about scientific advice, fantastic opportunity for industry to get early design input. But I see there's a gap here for also early design input in late development. So up between phase 3 and licensure, where we need to start looking at real world data and trying to see how will that shape so that the right data gets to NICE with some input for this very small scope of products. And we have a really good opportunity because through OLS, there's now a public-private partnership that I talked to both of you about on the dementia front that James has been brought in to be the MHRA lead. So MHRA, NICE, and NHS are being brought together. For full disclosure, I already said this before, I chair that committee. I think this is a great opportunity. It is funded by public-private money, largely public money in this particular case. I think it's coming from the NI piece, but it's a public-private partnership. I think we need within the MHRA to come up with a really tangible plan, almost a pathfinder, do it like a pilot to see what can we do differently for the future. It could be this as an opportunity, or you choose something, we need to choose something else. But having discussions and saying that there are going to be some changes here and there, I fear may not be enough. We need to look at this in a comprehensive way, bringing those parties together. And I think the 10-year plan, as you say, Lawrence, is a really good opportunity because if you look at what's happened now in terms of the ramifications, there are so many aspects that are not aligned with the 10-year plan. And we really cannot allow that to happen again. We need to give it the best shot. Will we crack it? I'm not sure, but we have to give it the best shot to find a way forward in this. And that requires also looking at the science in development a little bit, not just post-licensure. And sorry, the last thing I would like to say is just pick up. It'd be good to get from Julian, and we set up this group for both to see on a regular basis, how is that being put together? What is the progress? And very importantly, what's the outcome? And when we test it, we need to monitor and have metrics to know it's working. Otherwise, we won't know it's working. It's yet another process or procedure pathway that's been put that can be brought back. And that will circle back to the openness and trust that we talked about earlier, also to the wider community, to patients, to industry. It will open that up a little bit more because people will then understand what's being done. So a couple of thoughts there. Thank you.
Thanks, Raj. But I do, before I come on to Lawrence, I do agree with you that we need some real life examples. And I often think that within the papers that we receive, it would be really good sometimes to have real life examples of how this is working. But anyway, Lawrence.
Thanks, Raj. There's a lot in that, so I'll do my best. There's a few thoughts, really. I mean, I think firstly, and completely understand your passion, commitment for the goals around dementia. And I think if we look at the big disease categories, and we said, probably we would all accept dementia is the big area of disease where we feel we have got the least promising number of interventions coming through when we compare with, say, cancer and rare disease and so on. So there's clearly a big growing need there to come forward with effective and affordable therapies in dementia. One thing I just need to be clear about, particularly for those online, about the work we're doing with NICE, this is primarily focused on making sure that the process for marketing authorization and the process for health technology assessment are done in tandem, and that there is not a gap, therefore, between getting your marketing authorization and getting your medicine reimbursed on the NHS. What it is not within the scope of that work is the quality threshold, quality adjusted life years for the acronym, that NICE apply. So, in other words, if the particular medicine has a marketing authorization for safety and efficacy, it will still need to pass the NICE quality adjusted life year or cost per quality adjusted life year threshold. And if it doesn't do that, it won't necessarily get approval. So it's not adjusting that. But I know your concern is that we will have more medicines coming through that will get marketing authorization for safety and efficacy but won't meet that threshold. I think that is a growing issue. In terms of regulation, I do think we're going to see a change in the regulatory paradigm in the years ahead, because we have a regulatory paradigm that is principally based on looking at a small molecule against a disease target and assessing the safety and efficacy of that for population-wide use or for wide-scale use. But increasingly, the therapies you're talking about in an age of personalised medicine are going to be much, much narrower population groups where we don't necessarily need population-wide surveillance. We have a much more controlled small population group for a much more bespoke and personalised therapy, which changes the balance of decision-making from pre-market authorisation into a much heavier focus on post-market surveillance of a small population group. There is a significant issue with the cost per treatment, which is one for others outside this room, I think, to think about. What I would also say, though, is if we look at the broader environment of what's going on around UK life sciences and our country's attractiveness to bring novel therapies to this country, there are a good number of things that are in train, which are either in the 10-year health plan or have been trailed but will come forward in the life sciences delivery plan. For example, the very significant commitment to clinical trials in this country, both speed and efficiency with which we do clinical trials, really bringing down that end-to-end timescale and encouraging the NHS to be much quicker to mobilise once a trial has got approval. The provision of real expert scientific advice to companies early in the pathway, which we have unique expertise really in this country, along with a small number of other countries, clearly America being one of them, to engage with companies and scientists upstream in terms of specialised clinical advice around things like cancer, immunotherapies, gene and cell therapies, RNA, vaccines, AI as a medical device, etc. The country is also making a very significant commitment through a 600 million investment between Wellcome and the government to curate the national data sets we have to be more supportive of research and to work with industry to curate those national data sets for research. We've also got the catapults as a means through which to bring new and rare therapies more quickly into patients, into market. And then, of course, there is the ongoing review of, well, I'm going to call it VPAG, and then I'm going to have to remind myself exactly what that stands for. Remind me what VPAG exactly stands for. Value Pricing Agreement. Yeah. So in other words, the agreement between the government and industry about the cost at which we'll reimburse new medicines. And that is under review at the moment, and the government is committed to come forward with recommendations and a direction of travel to invest more in the medicines bill over time. And I deliberately use the word invest because of a recognition that actually investing in effective, cost-effective and safe medicines is an investment in national health and prosperity. So I think there are a lot of things that the government is doing, both in the 10-year plan and the life sciences delivery plan that will come forward shortly to address your concerns, your points, Raj. I mean, but fundamentally, there is an issue that all countries are facing, that the cost of some of these new therapies is very, very significant, and it's difficult to find reimbursement models within the public purse. And I don't think we can solve all of that through our work with NICE. What we can make sure is that we are bringing that health technology assessment and marketing assessment right into alignment.
Thanks, Lawrence. That's a very full and helpful explanation, but I think it's something the board will carry on looking at. And as I say, examples of a specific medicine or product device going through this system would be really helpful just to sort of see, and then it brings everything to life a little bit more. Hader, been patient. Mandy's been even more patient.
My thanks to Lawrence for a really clear and engaging report. I'm really pleased to hear of our leadership with the Health AI initiative. I think that's a brilliant initiative, and our focus on driving Reg Connect forward in particular, critical to our ongoing operational efficiency. My question relates to organizational culture and the need to continue the shift to a more open, trusting and empowered culture. Cultural evolution and transformation takes time, is notoriously difficult, and is a journey we've been on for some time. I'm curious to understand the mechanisms that you envisage being deployed to genuinely empower staff on this journey, and perhaps more importantly, how you see leadership being held accountable for fostering environments where openness, trust and empowerment can truly flourish.
A really important question, Haida. Thank you. I mean, I think it's worth saying that course, you all know better than I do. You've been on the board longer. Most of you have been on the board longer than I. Tasneem has joined us recently as well. Because the organisation clearly has been under a lot of pressure around its performance and the backlogs, the people in this organisation, leadership of this organisation, have done a terrific job in hauling us out of that position of being in backlog, having those backlogs and being behind where we need to be on performance. But that has been a hard slog. And I think we're now into a phase where we can say, having put that problem behind us, we can be much more forward thinking and outward looking. And that requires a culture where people are, in my kind of former language from the health service, empowered to operate at the top of their professional license. So they are making decisions consistent with the top of their license of practice, for want of a better term. And I do observe the organisation, and it's pretty clear from the staff survey that's publicly available, that there is a need to better empower people to take decisions at the top of their professional level of practice, which will actually make us work much more efficiently as an organisation because we don't have to double, triple and quadruple check everything. Culture change is not easy, clearly. I think we are absolutely committed as a leadership team to leading that organisational change. The staff survey data we have from previous years, but we will also have next year, give us really rich data about what we need to do differently. In terms of leadership being accountable for that, clearly all of our leaders can see their staff survey data by their own team and with a real sensitivity about the issues in their particular area. And I will be encouraging us to focus very, very closely on what our staff are telling us. We've held, since I've been here, a couple of all-staff forums. This is a regular thing we do anyway. And with Rachel and Rachel Bosworth and team, we'll be having more and more open dialogue with our people. We've used techniques like Slido in our all-staff to hear in real time what people think and to have an unfiltered conversation with our people about how they perceive the organisation. There's also hardwiring things like the scheme of delegation to make sure that's operating the correct way. I don't actually think it's the hardwiring things like that are the issue. I think it's more the cultural soft wiring that matters. But I don't underestimate the scale of the challenge to shift an organisation's culture. I'm absolutely determined we do it. I know my executive colleagues are too, and I think we just come back and report regularly on it. But I do think the staff survey in September will be a key moment in the calendar for us to make sure that the progress we're trying to make is being reflected in the way that our people experience the organisation.
Thanks, Lawrence. Sorry, Rachel, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you want to say anything about organisational culture? Or?
Well, as Lawrence has summarised, I think it's clear that we have more to do in a number of areas from people surveyed data over several years. But I think we've had some very positive feedback over the last few months about the early initiatives during Lawrence's tenure, and lots of plans to build on those over the rest of the summer and the autumn.
That's really encouraging. Thank you, Rachel. Mandy, do you want to?
Right, no, thanks, Anthony. And I'll echo, very useful report, very good to pose questions, I think, which is good and thought-provoking. I want to talk a little bit about Red Connect, and I think it comes together with the points I've made before about the collaboration with things like NICE, data and our culture, and the huge work that's been done to get us to a stable platform with good performance. It seems to me from what you say is Red Connect is going to take some time to be helping the agency in a good way. What are we going to do in that interim time, as we've had many reviews and the problems I think are well known, to help, how are we going to help our staff sustain this performance and take on these new things with systems which are perhaps at best designed for an older way of working?
Before coming on to, as you know, we're going to be discussing Regulatory Connect in some detail in the seminar section, but I'll hand over to Lawrence to make some brief comments about it now.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. Thanks, Anthony. So on the point about how we're going to sustain performance, and then I'll come on to Regulatory Connect. Well, I think the first thing to say is at the moment, we are heavily dependent on people in terms of scientific advice. Our processes are not as well automated as they could be. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're significantly increasing the number of people we have capable of doing scientific assessment. So that should, and it links to Hyder's earlier point, it should reduce some of the excessive burden we've been putting on people, because we will have more people qualified to make scientific judgments. The Department of Health in the spending review settlement has given us a good amount of support to invest in our technological capabilities. So I don't intend to rest on our laurels just because we've got enough people to sustain performance. We absolutely should be looking to automate and use technology to become much more efficient and to become an easier organisation to deal with for our industry customers. And that's absolutely something I'm committed to doing. It's too early for me to say exactly what I think we're going to be going in terms of the timescales for Regulatory Connect, other than to say it's clearly, like a lot of IT programs, it's clearly one that is going to take longer than we had initially thought and couldn't cost more than we initially thought. And that's not particularly a surprise to anyone. And I am with James, the SRO, and with our new programme director taking stock. And I appreciate the board may be somewhat frustrated because you feel there have been previous reviews, but I do think I need to go back and really get to the heart of the issues about why it's been delayed, in order that we can make sure we put the automation back on the right footing. So I'm committed. We will get this. We will get the automation of our processes right, but we may have to just take a moment to take stock in order that we make the right moves from here onwards.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. And I think that's encouraging that we've got more people, because clearly these things all connect round. And I think it's really important that we have a contingency to allow that to happen, because, as you say, it is going to take longer and cost more inevitably too. Thank you.
Great. Well, I think I sort of reflect the mood of the board that actually your report has inspired a lot of confidence in us. I think we can really see things moving, changes happening, performance getting better. Feel quite optimistic about the future of this agency, and so thank you very much, Lawrence. Really, really good. Okay, we'll come on to the next item now. A little bit delayed, but I thought it was worth having a full discussion about the CEO report. I'm sure you'll all agree. So the next item is the monthly finance and people performance report, which I'm going to hand over to Rose to talk about.
Thank you, Chair. So in summary, for the first 2 months of the financial year, we had a slightly slow start to income generation in April, but we've caught up a little in May, but we're still £1.2 million behind our budget after 2 months. Pay costs are slightly over budget, and operating costs are £2.7 million behind budget after 2 months. But both of these, we believe, are timing differences. So the difference between how we've profiled the budget and how we are actually spending it, rather than a perceived proper underspend. So as you can see, we do have pressures emerging on our spend, and with the lower income, ExCo will be doing a deep dive at the end of Q1 to look at how we make sure we will break even this financial year. Our capital spend is in a good place. It's on track. And projects have started earlier this year than normal. So this helps us de-risk our ability to spend the higher capital awarded by DHSC to MHRA this year. On the people side, we continue to recruit into our structure, including into the new roles approved as part of the budget. And our turnover of staff is quite low. It was at 5.3% in May. So our staffing levels do continue to increase by 24 people in May, and overall since the beginning of the financial year, 44 new people in total 44 increase in FTE since the beginning of April. So a really good position, as you say, for resourcing our operational requirements. So that's a quick summary of the paper, and happy to take any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I mean, obviously, clearly it's early days in terms of the year cycle, but Michael.
It's a good paper by Finance, so thank you for that. The only observation I'd make is it is only 2 months. I appreciate that. But I can, multiple organisations will turn around to you and say, oh, well, it's only 2 months worth of data. And just a bit nervous about the point that you said about profiling, that we're not getting the profiling right. And I would have thought for an organisation, again, it's not a criticism of you, Rose, we ought to be able to do that. And, Lawrence, I think about the world that you come from, the NHS more widely is under so much pressure to deliver efficiencies and cost effectiveness. Getting our profiling right so that we get an accurate assessment is not that difficult. And we ought to be looking to do better in that space. And that would be the message I would give to the executive team and all managers within the organisation. I'm a bit nervous about, if I've got that right, the profile around things like maintenance at South Mims. That's stuff that ought to be able to get right, given the history that we've got there. So we just need to watch this, I think, going forward, to be truthful. But it's a good 2 months. It's difficult, but
I think that's a very fair challenge. I don't know if Lawrence and Rose, you want to come back on that.
Right. I'll pick that up. Thanks, Lawrence. Yes, no, it's a very fair challenge. Thank you. I think, so we've done a lot of work on our pay forecasting and the profile for that, given that we are doing a lot of recruitment and the pay rises, etc. So I think that I'm happy that our pay modelling is now actually very precise. And if you recall, we landed last year very close, which was the first time we'd done quite so closely on our pay. So I'm very happy that finance are kind of in control of that. I think some of the profiling, definitely the profiling of other things needs to be improved. Some of that is caused a little bit by late settlements and decisions about our financing, which does mean that our decisions around what we're going to deliver can come quite late. And therefore don't get into the profiling well enough. I think particularly on our maintenance, that is driven also by issues about how quickly we can get contractors signed up to do the work we want. But I'm talking to the team about how we improve that. So we are making steady progress about better profiling, but recognise it's still not nearly there yet.
Yeah, just briefly to add to what Rose said, three quick points. So I am, definitely not overly worried 2 months in, but that said, we are at the end of Q1. Rose and I are going to meet with every one of the executives to just go through this in certain detail, because I think Q1 is the time to start making earlier conclusions about where we stand. That's the first thing. The second thing to say is I am, though, encouraged by where we landed at the end of last year, because whilst the profiling may not be great, if I look at where we landed, we pretty much landed on the nose. We spent pretty much all the money available to us. So I can see that the organisation is able to land its plane on the carrier, as it were. And then the third thing to say is I've commissioned a piece of work that will be happening over the coming months around overall performance reporting, which of course drives our income. And people will get to hear more about that, particularly non-execs. I'm going to be writing to non-execs and asking them to engage with the organisation that I brought in to help us with that. Because I think if I look at not just financial profiling, but overall performance profiling, the measures that we use, which we of course have to use, they're part of the way in which we're governed. But there are other measures that we could supplement to see the stock and flow of the work coming through, and therefore to predict the income more accurately. So I'll be writing to all non-exec directors, asking them to give their views on what they would appreciate from a performance and therefore a financial reporting point of view.
Thank you very much, Rose, and for that, Lawrence. Very helpful. So we'll move on to the next item if there's not any other questions, which is the ARAC annual report to the board. Now, for those that are listening online, ARAC is our Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. And this is a very, very important assurance committee for the board. And actually, I was struck by at one of the opening paragraphs in Michael's report. I'll come to Michael in a minute, which I'm going to read out actually for the benefit again of the public and for the board again. The committee's primary role, this is the ARAC's committee's primary role, is to provide the board with an independent and objective view of the adequacy and effectiveness of the MHRA's governance arrangements, systems of internal controls, financial control, and the management of risk. So as you can see from that, it's a very, very important committee. And I welcome your report, Michael, and I don't know whether you wanted to discuss it a little bit.
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind the board and members of the public, there is a requirement that the audit committee provide an annual report to the board on the work that it's done over the last financial year, and this should go in tandem with the consideration of the annual report and financial statements. So the next item that we have on the agenda is the annual report and financial statements, and I will refer to those in a moment. The report also encompasses the most recent meetings of ARAC, which took place a week ago and in May, and which the primary focus there was looking at the financial statements and the work done to get to the audit opinion for the financial year ending the 31st of March 2025. Just a few things to bring to the board's attention. First and foremost, our external auditors are the National Audit Office, and under statute, it is the Controller and Auditor General who issues the audit opinion on the financial statements of the agency. And those financial statements and annual report have to be laid in Parliament before Parliament goes for its summer recess. So we're talking about the next couple of weeks. I'm pleased to report that the NAO have advised me and Rose that they will be recommending to the Controller and Auditor General that he issues a clear audit opinion, which is very good news. There are some final checks to be done, but neither Rose nor I anticipate that that's going to engender any particular difficulties. So that is a good result. Building on what Lawrence has said earlier, I'd also say that Rose and I have reflected on this. I think this is the best year that we've experienced in getting to a clean set of accounts, and the process has been largely seamless. So Rose, tremendous thanks to you and the finance team, and also the governance team led by Carly and Sarah. The remit of the committee is around financial control and governance, and we form our opinion, our overall advice to Lawrence as accounting officer on the work of internal audit, but also a whole range of other reports that are presented to the committee throughout the year. This relating to, for example, information governance, how we manage and mitigate the risks of fraud, as well as looking at the agency's risk register and assurance framework. Again, I'm pleased to note that this year internal audit have issued a moderate opinion on the agency's control environment, and that is really good news given that the last 3 years were a limited appraisal. So again, the organisation has moved forward and a lot of work has been done over the last year. So first point I'd make is, very briefly, this has been a good year for the agency. I think its governance is in a good position. But as an auditor, and given, can I say, the natural conservatism with a small c of the audit profession, you wouldn't expect me not to say there are challenges going forward. So in the final part of the report, I've just set out 8 particular areas that the committee will continue to focus on over the next year. I just want to mention a few of those. I think 3 in particular. The first one is route to moderate, route to green, brilliant. We got there. We've got high levels of performance. You don't need me to say we can't afford to fall back. We've regained the confidence of our stakeholders. If we have any fallback in performance, that confidence will quickly go. So the issue for me really is all these changes are really fundamental, but it's to the extent to which they are now embedded within the culture of the organisation relates to Haider's point, and we need to continue to watch that. I know the executive and under Lawrence's leadership are very committed to ensuring that these changes continue to deliver the high levels of performance, particularly in meeting our statutory functions. But the Audit Committee in a constructive way will continue to monitor that going forward. The second point I have said we will focus on next year is around risk management. Again, I think the agency is in a strong position, but the challenges that government have given us, and particularly around ensuring patient safety, means that we need to be vigilant in making sure that we manage and mitigate risks effectively. And we had a very successful board development day a few weeks ago around the redevelopment of our strategy, and from the strategy should flow a new assessment of our risk profile. And also I'm very conscious of the work that Paul is doing as chair of his committee, looking at how well we've got the balance between risk and benefit for the benefit of patients. So that would be the third area that I would focus on. And my final one is really relating to Regulatory Connect. There's been a good degree of honesty and transparency about that we need to do better with Regulatory Connect, and again, building on Mandy's question. When we know what the route forward is going to be, this will be an area that ARAC will continue to focus on. But Chair, that's my summary of where we are at the moment. A good year, but we can't be complacent. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent summary. It has been a good year. Just explain to the listeners, actually, moderate is quite a good place to be. It's the word moderate doesn't have connotations of being good. It actually is quite good. But we do need to sustain that, and we mustn't be complacent. I don't know whether you wanted to say anything about that, Lawrence, or
well, no, only Michael to thank you for your work, and particularly to thank the teams involved. Again, this was we weren't in such a good place last year. A huge amount of work has gone into this, so thanking everyone involved.
And I think the board would like to thank you, Michael, and also the ARAC, the members, which is, of course, Michael, Mandy, Paul, and now Raj, I think, isn't it? You're on ARAC now as well, for your work over the last year and support. And I think your, as you said in your intro, actually your report leads quite nicely onto the next item, which is talking about the annual report and accounts which we have to lay before Parliament. Part of the reason that we're having the meeting now early in July is so that we get it in before the parliamentary recess. So I'm going to hand over to...
Yeah, I wanted to comment on this one, if that's...
well, I didn't have anything down here.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I was late coming forward. I am the Raising Concerns champion, so I've got to mention that on 3.14. And just to make it clear that I've done quite a bit of work with the team about making sure that they understand that I'm around, that I'm the independent Raising Concerns champion. So really to commend the team, really, and they're really kind of pushing the fact that we exist and to support people coming forward. And obviously raising the fact that kind of I'm around and I'm on the board, and I'm kind of the independent person on the board as well. I just want staff to kind of realise that we do publicity. I think there's a video out about me as well. So just to make sure that kind of people realise that. But obviously I've got a watching brief on that too. And as we move, hopefully to gain confidence in the organisation about open and transparency, I hope we can also kind of look in this area as well. So that was my only comment.
Thank you, Mercy. I'm sorry you weren't on my list. And I think Rose actually, I've just noticed, put up her hand. So do you want to say something, Rose? Nicola, sorry.
It's no problem. If I may, I would just like to make a point to assure the board. So under section 3.19, we're commenting here about some activity on the science campus with our regulator, the Health and Safety Executive. And the point I'd just like to reassure the board is that we do have an active licence for our specified animal pathogen order. So a SAPO licence, it covers quite a range of work. And the comment here is really that to bring one activity, which we have at the moment, which we're not, we don't have live, to bring that back into focus, we would need to update that licence. So it really is just to reassure the board that everything that we have is covered by a licence. It is reviewed by the HSE, but to bring one particular activity back up live, we would need to make a change to that. And the alternate provision that we have is we have an agreement with another establishment so that we have a mitigation in place should we need to do any work on that particular activity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. I'm obviously getting my Christian names and my surnames muddled up. It's too many Roses and Nicolas. Anyway. So thank you both for that. Let's come on to the report and the accounts, which was the next item, and it was Carly and Christian name Rose to talk about this. So I'll hand over to you both.
Thanks, Anthony. I don't think that I need to say too much more than what's in the paper in relation to the production of the annual report element of the report. There is hot off the press this morning, a designed copy on each of the three tables. So one there just between Claire and Mandy, Mercy, you've picked it up, and one here with Anthony. So do please have a look at that. It is the same content. But we do always try and get you a copy of the bells and whistles version. As you know, we are under a lot of very strict controls in terms of exactly what we have to put in this report and where it has to go. But I think this has been, in counterpart to Rose's excellent work on finances, this has been the best year in terms of bringing together all that the agency has accomplished and getting that into the report in a way that enables hopefully sign off today, but critically pays testament to all of the work that's been done this year. Rose.
Yes, just a very brief update on the financial element of it. We've cleared the first point that was outstanding. The second point that was outstanding about the 2 million paid last year. And the NAO are just finalising the first point to clear that as well. And since this report was written, because a lot changes in audit over 10 days, we have done some more extra work on deferred income and made some adjustments to the accounts, but they are reflected in the current copy you have there, Anthony. So, and as Michael said, the NAO are looking at a clean audit certificate, which is excellent news.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about the report? Mercy.
Just got a comment, really. So my comments are, it's really nice to see a tribute to June after all those years of service. So that was really nice. And just to say that I also like the very clear way we describe what we do. I think that's going to be really helpful for the public to actually know the range of things that we cover, which many people are not aware of. So I just like the presentation in it.
Lawrence.
Yeah, just on that point, looking to Rachel, I think it's still our intention to publish alongside this report a more digestible version, because we are aware that because it is so prescribed what we have to put in the report, it's not necessarily the most sort of lively read for the public at large, but it is important that we increase the awareness of what we do. So I think we've got something that's a bit more public friendly coming out alongside this.
Yes, that's right. There will be a short public friendly version that will be published alongside to make it more accessible.
Thank you. And can I just thank everybody that contributed to this report? I think it reads really well. I think it is well written. It's nicely presented. I agree it's long, but it needs to be long because of statutory reasons. And I think it will be a good report to be laid before Parliament. I think Michael has a last comment.
Yes, Chair, just to help Rose and Colin, I think we have to formally say that we approve the annual report and financial statements so that Lawrence can now sign them. So sorry, it's a procedure, but I just want to make sure we've got that documented.
So does everybody formally approve the report? Lots of nods around the room. Any dissenters? No. Okay. Formally approved. Do I have a stamp that I put in? Seal. Seal. Great. Okay. Well, well done to everybody. Well, I think it's as I say, I think it's a good comprehensive report which will which I think hopefully some parliamentarians will have time to look at. So thank you. Let's come on to the next item, which is the yellow card biobank pilot and feedback on recruitment. So I think Jessica's joined us for this item. Can I hand over to you, Alison, talk a little bit more about this pilot scheme and explain what you'd like from the board?
Yes. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes. This is an update really on the first 2 years of the yellow card biobank, and I alluded to it at an earlier stage in the meeting. This is part of our efforts to move from reactive to proactivity in our safety and surveillance by identifying identifying the underlying mechanism of an adverse drug reaction. So just for a bit of a background, adverse drug reactions probably cost the NHS in terms of direct in-hospital costs of at least £2.2 billion a year. And that does not include the ongoing community sort of outpatient care of individuals or the impact of an individual on their daily lives. Moreover, we believe up to 30% of those adverse drug reactions might be there might be a genetic component underlying them. So I think there is both a public health and an economic imperative for us to try and identify the mechanisms of adverse drug reactions so that we can better mitigate those reactions proactively before they occur. So the Yellow Card Biobank project was launched as a pilot just over 2 years, just about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and we initiated it with 2 study topics. So we picked 2 adverse drug reactions associated with the drug, obviously. So that was allopurinol and severe skin reactions, and direct acting oral anticoagulants and severe bleeding. We have just actually launched a 3rd topic, which we communicated just a couple of weeks ago, which is the GLP-1 receptor agonist, which we mentioned earlier, in acute pancreatitis. This report, however, just gives the board an update on what we've really learnt over the last 2 years. The pilot to date has established governance process. It demonstrated successful operational feasibility. We've done a huge amount of stakeholder engagement with patients, but also with healthcare professionals and various organisations. And we've learnt a lot of lessons over the last 2 years about which particular adverse drug reactions might be more suitable for this project and the best ways to recruit patients into that project. We just seek the board's thoughts on this, any suggestions on further improvements that we might make, and yeah, just to seek your views on how effectively the 2 years of the pilot has been progressed. I'll just pass to Jessica Wright, who's the head of the Yellow Card Biobank, if you have any more thoughts, Jessica.
Yeah, I could give a quick overview of some of those lessons learned. And the team has been recording these sort of throughout the project, using participant surveys, interviews with healthcare professionals, and also discussions at governance committees, such as with our patient advisory group and steering committees. So some of the key themes relate to recruitment in this paper. And one of the main findings is that patient yellow card reporters typically have a very high sign-up rate to the study of around 58%. So it is useful to look at topics with those high patient reporter rates, such as our new topic Alison's just mentioned. And preliminary analysis there shows that around 35% of reporters are patients, which was more than for our other earlier topics. And the recent press release and media coverage across the BBC and ITV News, highlighting the importance of submitting yellow card reports if you experience this reaction, has really led already to an uptick in patients who are going online to report. So that shows how important it is to raise awareness of this project through media and communications. I think disappointingly, we've had a low sign up through contacting healthcare professional yellow card reporters. When we looked at older reports, many of those healthcare professionals had retired or moved or weren't contactable. And others didn't have the resources to support the project because we're asking them to invite patients on our behalf. But we are, however, very grateful to the 40 healthcare professionals who did reply to us. Unfortunately, though, they couldn't always help. Sometimes the patient had died or they couldn't locate them. So, but nevertheless, we did have 16% go on to invite patients, and including identifying 3 out of 9 of our participants who experienced the allopurinol and severe skin reactions, which is a very, very rare reaction. So we've got some notes on how we're going to improve that healthcare professional response and patient sign-up rates, and we've started a shift to more proactive approach, contacting healthcare professionals as soon as the reports come in. And we've also implemented conditional questions on the Yellow Card website, so they can choose if they wish to be contacted. And we can now also, with appropriate contracting in place, the healthcare professional could ask patients for a verbal agreement to pass on their details to the biobank team so that we can do that work of sending the invites out. I think if just a few other points is that the clinical practice research data link or searching GP records has been incredibly important for the project, accounting for around 2/3 of recruitment. So we're now investigating if we can carry on working with CPRD for this next topic. And I think the final challenge to highlight has been ensuring diversity in terms of age, sex, background and location. And we do anticipate the introduction of this new topic could change some of our demographics because it's likely to reach a younger population. And to make things more accessible, we've been working with our patient advisory groups, simplify our languages and give options for receiving materials in larger fonts and things like that. In terms of the devolved nations, we've been working closely with Yellow Card centres and other stakeholders to improve awareness and involvement. And just want to say a thank you to the excellent clinical centres in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, who are already working with us to invite patients. So thank you for considering this paper, and we're happy to receive any suggestions on how we can increase recruitment success, especially as we're moving rapidly into the recruitment for the new topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Recruitment, as every researcher here knows, is always the difficult issue. So I'm going to invite comments on that particularly. Shall we start? Can we start with Claire's got her hand up, and then go to Paul?
Thank you, Jessica. A couple of things from me. And you touched upon demographics in the last part of the overview. I was just thinking about maybe be more creative in that reach, especially with those different harder to reach demographics. So not through the usual suspects, so community leaders and that kind of thing, not necessarily through health. So I wondered how much you'd thought about that. And then the other point is around, can we be more creative and maybe less passive, if that's the right phrase to use, around the data sets that we have access to, search out different data sets again, instead of the usual suspects, and where we might not have access, just be more tenacious in pursuing that, and also the techniques that we use from a tech perspective on how we might better utilise data. And the only other thing is you talked about counterparts around the UK. Are there examples of exemplars outside of the UK that have something similar that we might be able to replicate? Thank you.
I'll leave Jessica to talk about the community outreach. I just wanted to touch on your comment about different data sets, and that's a valuable one. We, of course, use CPRD, which is our clinical practice research data link, which is in our in-house real-world evidence electronic health record data set. But it does only cover 30% of the UK. So we could reach out to other data sets, other primary care data sets, and they may be able to help us recruit, but also very much with the new topic, which is GLP-1s and acute pancreatitis, because those patients will be admitted to hospital for that, and you may not get all the linkage back to the primary care. So we could consider how we could link to secondary care data more in that particular topic. So yeah, that's a good point, and we could look to do that. It's always a little bit resource because it actually is quite challenging and time consuming to do that, and there's a lot of data governance that we'll go through, but we'll certainly explore that. In terms of exemplars, in terms of recruitment, do you mean, or in terms of other pharmacogenomic data sets?
I guess both, but we're specifically talking about recruitment today, aren't we? So just wondering how others might do that outside of the UK, if they have something similar to a yellow card or reporting system.
The fundamental principle of the yellow card biobank is to use the yellow card scheme as a way to recruit patients. And as Jessica mentioned, it's been incredibly successful. I would like to thank all of the patients who have responded to the call to our request to join, and we're incredibly grateful to that. And nearly 60% of patients did respond, and that was the principle that underlay the thinking here, is that patients who've suffered adverse drug reactions are more likely to be willing to sign up to, and actually have reported them, are then likely to be willing to sign up and help us in terms of understanding the mechanism. So that is a primary principle of the yellow card biobank, but we always recognize that we would need other routes. I think there is very few other similar systems focused on adverse drug reactions specifically, but certainly we're looking to work with other cohorts such as our Future Health and other systems like that who are recruiting at speed to see how we might be able to work with them more in the future in terms of engaging with their patient population. But of course, that would have to be very carefully managed. But maybe I'll pass to Jessica now for the community outreach, because it's a really good point.
Thanks, Alison. I think what I would add about being a bit more creative with outreach is that we are, for the new topic, we are going to recruit or sample using saliva sampling. And we have been told that this could be more acceptable to lots of to different groups. Also, it's very useful for remote locations as well, such as the far reaches of Scotland and Northern Ireland, and we can send the packs in the post and people can sign up that way. So we're hoping that will encourage people to sign up, perhaps more than blood sampling, which is what we're using before.
Thanks. I've got a couple of clinicians now who are used to recruiting. So let's go to Paul first of all.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's a really important project, and I can see how it's going to evolve very positively, particularly with potentially every baby having their genome sequenced, and some interesting lessons learned, I think. And the first observation I have is that arguably more deaths or harm is caused from a clot rather than a hemorrhage from, so the opposite. And we've missed that, and understand why, but it's just that reflection that we've always got to consider both sides of the coin. And I just wonder, I mean, recruitment is a big challenge. What is the cost, the pound per patient recruited for this project? I think that's something we need to know, and we've got to evolve into a better system for recruitment. And I know a hematologist who specializes in clotting, and wants to optimize patients on DOACs. And most DOAC prescriptions are from general medics, not from specialist hematologists, and are not always optimal. And she would get maybe a couple of inquiries from physicians a week, but far more were started on it. And what the hospital did is they introduced an automated trawl of the hospital record, so they could work out exactly every week who had been started on it. And as a result, they picked up 50 or 60 patients now every week. And the hematology nurses then go in and say, okay, this is a higher risk patient. We're going to sort of handhold and optimize. So I think we could just evolve to a much better way of recruitment, not just here, but more broadly.
I'll let Jessica just talk about the outreach we already had made to haematology departments. I just wanted to pick up on the cost per pound. So yes, if you look at that, it has been an expensive project, but I would emphasize all of the governance work and the establishment work that's been done over the last 2 years. That's ethical approval, setting up the processes, understanding what works and what doesn't work. And we hope that in the future business model, we will be scaling up considerably in the number of samples that we're collecting, which will make it a more efficient project. Jessica, would you just like to pick up on the point on outreach to haematology departments?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we have spoken to clinicians in different departments, and some of them very usefully have systems like the one you've described. And they have worked with us to identify patients. I think there are also a lot of people who've done audits out there, and they've been helping us recruit as well. But I think there is more to perhaps be done with those sort of larger registries of patients. And we did start working with registries in this first phase in relation to Stevens-Johnson syndrome, and that has, I think, potential, and we should look more into that as well. But as far as we know at the moment for this new topic, we don't know of any relevant sort of registries or databases yet. So in case you've got any ideas there, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, this was set up as an automated system specifically to pull out particular patients, and that's a direction of travel.
I wonder, thinking this through, whether this is a topic which possibly come to your committee, Paul, for further thought. Actually, that would be really, really helpful, I think. Can I go to Graham and then Raj? Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I mean, you mentioned recruitment. We do these things because they're hard, so I'm pleased that you've done it, and I'm pleased you've done the thing rather than talk about the thing. So it's great to see the data coming through, and we can learn from that. I think, as Paul alludes to, it's well aligned to the 10-year plan, which is quite strong on genomics, and I think it's a good area for the agency to be working in. I really support the move to look at GLP-1s. I think you know my thoughts previously about the validity or the value of the anticoagulants and the azathioprine. So I think moving to something which is more about discovery, I think, is really helpful. And I think it's in that context, maybe a conversation we could take off about what sort of samples are really going to be helpful if you're thinking about discovery. But the thoughts about making it easier to access are good. In terms of representation and inclusivity, I mean, I think I hear your point about age and GLPs. I think that may be true. I would worry more about ethnicity, and actually that probably won't address that. And just would be worth thinking about drugs that are used at scale in different ethnic groups, and thinking about whether to do something with that, which might help you in a number of ways. And one that would come to mind would be oral hypoglycemics for diabetes, for example, where there are some signals that might be worth looking at. And I suppose my question would be just about fragmentation, and we talked about Penny Dash's report in general terms, but just to think about the long-term sustainability, whether there's something more to think about aligning with existing downstream mechanisms for curating and analysing, recognising that the front door of the yellow card is really important, but you're already talking to our future health. Should we just be asking patients if they want to be recruited to UK Biobank or our future health in a way that we could then leverage the system without reinventing it? And I don't know the answer, but I think it's worth just having that thought.
Yes. Yeah, I do think it's a very interesting option to see if we could work with other cohorts who are already recruiting and collecting samples, and whether there's some way we could leverage that activity rather than, we're not trying to duplicate here. I guess that would be at scale, and those patients may not have suffered the adverse drug reaction that we're particularly interested in. So we're very focused on that. But I think it could be certainly something worth discussing.
I was thinking the other way around. I was thinking that you recruit into the biobank from the point of an adverse event, not from the biobank.
Right,
and
right, yeah, certainly.
You remain the front door, but the downstream apparatus could be shared.
Raj.
My question is very similar to Graham's, really. Really exciting to see the linkage between genomics and safety, Alison. So this is really important work, I think, for future direction, for prevention more than treatment, if I'm looking at it. It was really Graham's promise trying to bring, I think, seeing there is emerging evidence between a correlation between ethnic groups and like diabetes, cardiovascular. I wonder if it would be worthwhile to just kind of look at those areas and then, to Graham's point, really very specifically do a work back from your AEs to see, because the primary care area is where we will have most patients. Where if we do come through with an area of breakthrough for benefit, hypothetically, if we target on the primary care diseases, your impact will be much bigger. So looking at those common areas of primary care diseases to see what can we do, it could be both a low-hanging fruit in the context of sample size, and you got GPRD, but it could also have bigger impact just because you'll be able to outreach more patients. The last question is really good to hear the increase in percentage on the GLP since you went on media. My question is, you gave us a percentage. Are those numbers big enough in terms of sample size for statistical significance? That was really more my question. Because if we don't have that, then we may have to do something more to get it.
Pass to Jessica for the sample size, but in terms of your point about commonly used drugs, certainly the data that we have would be most adverse drug reactions actually, and certainly the study I referred to arose from those commonly used drugs, the drugs that were used every day in our populations. So it is very critical to understand if we could identify mechanisms underpinning those adverse drug reactions. And that would be a big focus going forward. We are thinking about what the future business model might look like for the biobank to increase the number of adverse drug reactions which we can capture and identify. And one of those is to look at all serious reactions, and actually most of those are likely to be often in commonly used drugs, but not forgetting the new innovative drugs that come through into the market as well. So that will be probably a future board topic, but we are still working on what that model might look like. Jessica, do you want to talk about the sample size? Obviously, this is iterative, so we're getting data in every single day, and currently about 70 yellow cards a day coming in on GLP-1s, and that's obviously not all pancreatitis related events, but certainly it's very encouraging uplift in reporting. Jessica, what are we aiming for? This is a discovery project, I would say, so it's quite hard to do sample size on such thing, but we have to be very clear on the phenotype that we do that, so we don't introduce a lot of noise into the analysis. Jessica.
Thank you. Yes, so we've spoken to bioinformaticians and statisticians on this question, and the answer really is that we need to recruit as many people as we can. So we end up with a more pragmatic sample size estimation, given all of our reports that we've received. So I guess I'd like to put a pin in that, because we have seen this upturn in reports. So I think that could be sort of relooked at in the context of the success of our recent media work. So yes, I would like to come back to that if that's okay, and we can give a written statement to the board on that potentially.
Graham, one last point.
It's very brief. I mean, I think just to encourage you to be as large as possible, and just to note that I'm delighted we're having sample size discussions at board. That's a big change.
Well, I think I'd like to push this topic to regulation and safety. Actually, I'm not sure it's a wider board discussion, but I think all these points are very valid and clearly an important area for the future. If we're going to become about personalized medicines, this is going to become really, really important. So thank you. I'm going to move on now because I think we've got some number of questions from the public, but we've also got to do 2 reports. And I'm conscious that one of the questions from the public, I think Julian has to answer, and you have to leave by 12:20. Is that right, Julian? So let's come on to these reports, and then I'll give you time to answer that question. Mercy, People and Public Engagement Committee.
And I will introduce this very briefly.
Yeah, just to remind everybody, this is really one of the key focuses of this committee is optimizing public engagement. So I'll hand over to you.
So this is the first meeting of our new committee, People and Public Engagement. And I was delighted that we could start it and that we really approved the terms of reference with one rider, in that we are covering people, which is the HR function, as well as public engagement. And we want to make sure that the terms of reference is balanced in that way, and that going forward, the agenda is also balanced in that way. So that was the kind of the conclusion of our a review of the terms of reference as well. So it will come back to the committee, but overall, the terms of reference were approved. We also had a couple of other items that we discussed: the refresh of the patient and public involvement strategy. So the patient and public involvement strategy has been around for some years. So this was our chance to look at the refresh, and our recommendation was looking at more metrics and evaluation of it as well. And finally, the CPRD, which we've spoken about quite a bit at this committee. At board, which is the Clinical Practice Research Data Link. And I was very pleased that they approached the committee very early on around public engagement. So this is a new project they're undergoing, and we had quite a detailed discussion. But as I said, it's quite early on in their kind of looking at how they inform the public on changes they want to implement and stuff. So we will see it again as they work up more of that, the way they're going to do that on this particular project and reclassification of data that they're looking at. Yes, very pleased that our first meeting had good discussions, and it'll be good to see how this committee develops.
Thank you, Mercy. I mean, this is a really, really important committee in terms of board assurance, and particularly holding, Lawrence and his executive to account for, the people score, and working very closely with Rachel in terms of public engagement over a whole wide range of issues. So very, very important committee, and really looking forward to hearing reports on a regular basis back from you. Thank you. And now we come on to the other new committee, which is the Regulation and Safety Committee, which Paul is going to chair, and I'm going to say a few words about that.
Yeah, and it's integrating, I think, with both ARAC, the Audit Committee, and Mercy's Patient Committee as well. Although taking very much a sort of patient-focused approach, and what does the patient need to know, and how is it communicated to them to make optimal decisions, and supporting the clinicians in that as well. But sort of thinking as a broad framework about the whole life cycle, from early development of a drug or device through trials and then through launch, and what is the sort of the robust analytical way in which things can be achieved to deliver its aims. So this is going to be a sort of work in progress. We had our first meeting and the beginnings of that framework being fleshed out in the coming months.
It's really helpful. When I started as chair, I mean, two of my key objectives were to improve patient safety and to embrace risk proportion regulation. And I hope your committee really are going to look at those, as well as improving the people and the experience of the organisation, which your committee will look. So I'm very, very pleased about both these new committees, and look forward to hearing more from you regularly, Paul, about your committee's activities. So thank you very much. Okay, that brings us on to questions from members of the public. As mentioned in my introduction, this is a board meeting held in public and not a public meeting. So we'll only be taking questions from the public that are related to today's agenda. We've received 3 pre-submitted written questions from the public, unfortunately none of which were related to the agenda. As they are not related to agenda item, they will receive a written reply, but outside this meeting. But we may have received questions whilst we were live, and I think one of them is related to Julian, isn't it? Is that right, Rachel?
Yeah, that's right. There's just one question today, and it relates to the Regulation and Safety Committee, actually, which Paul has just mentioned. But I'm sure Julian will perhaps want to respond as well, potentially Paul. And it's, to what extent can this committee's work on improving the reputation of the UK as a market for medicine and device development be informed by product developers who might be considering the UK as a market?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's really looking at how do we bring in stakeholder views, bring in other developments within the in medicines, devices areas. So as a concept, we run pipeline meetings. We look at a lot of different ways of establishing what products will potentially come to the agency. So other parts of the agency, because it's quite a broad committee. So Alison, obviously, from a safety point of view, but we will look to bring in those stakeholder views, bring that for board consideration so that we can then really come to that aim, as Anthony has alluded to look at risk proportionate, but equally to make sure that we are future thinking, and it's not just looking at the regulation of medicines and devices, which is we're now looking at, but what is coming 3, 5, 10 years away, so that we can be prepared with those frameworks and look at the monitoring of patient safety within that context. So it's really looking at liaising with companies, come and talk to us, come talk to me, come talk to Alison, others, to then say, how do we then have that input into that committee?
Thank you. Do you want to say a few words about an answer to that question as well, Paul?
I think partly also the composition of the committee, that we've got a good mix, that you've put the right people on the committee, and yes, we sort of need to listen. And I think in terms of ambition, if we can get data flowing, we talk repeatedly about data at this meeting and the NHS more broadly, that is our competitive advantage as a country, would get us better safety and would also enable it to be a more attractive market, because we'd then be able to accelerate things through faster if we had the assurance of better data flowing from products once they're launched.
Thank you. Rachel, any more questions?
No, that's the only question from this morning's meeting.
Okay, well, thank you. So as that concludes the questions for today, I'd just like to thank everybody who's been watching today's board meeting. I'd particularly like to thank our staff in the agency who have contributed to the production of the papers and supporting the meeting. And many of you will know it's the last meeting of 4 of the members of the board. And we're going to have an opportunity during the seminar in the afternoon to thank them in full. But I'd just like to briefly thank in public Mandy for your really extensive expertise, guidance and commitment to the agency during your time here. and particularly as your role as interim co-chair, I think from August 23 to December 24, a long time. And we'll have an opportunity to say a little bit more about you this afternoon, but thank you. And thank you, Hader and Claire. You've both made a valuable contribution to the board, particularly the work you've done in the technology space, and contributed to technology roadmap and cybersecurity work. Thank you both. And again, we'll have an opportunity to say a little bit more about you, Hader, and Lawrence will have an opportunity to say a bit more about Claire this afternoon. And I think it's Harriet's last meeting as well, who's made a significant contribution to the board in terms of building partnerships with our stakeholders since taking on the role of interim director of partnerships. And we really wish you well in your new role, Harriet. So before we leave, I'd like to remind everybody listening that the purpose of the MHRA is to protect and improve public health. And we do this by continuing to enable scientific innovation, accelerating patient access to new products, and strengthening our patient safety and surveillance systems. So with that in mind, I'll now close the meeting. Thank you for watching today. I hope you found it an interesting and fruitful experience. And thank you for your time, and have a great day in the rest of the sunshine. It's a beautiful day outside, so thank you very much.